All right, so we'll look at the admin center. Let's take a little time and look at the admin center. Okay, everybody, so here we are on a 20H1 Hyper-V server, and I've installed a semi-interchannel version of, I believe, the 21H1 version. Yeah, so we'll log into the server core, and as you'll see when you get logged in here, pretty much it'll take you right to a command prompt. So at this particular point, you have pretty much all the DOS commands, or you can enable PowerShell. But again, everything you're doing is pretty much at the command line. So this is again where you can bring in those features on demand if you wanted to use those other consoles. But essentially, with this being again GUI-less, which is giving you a lesser attack surface, it's great to have remote management. So we're going to exit out here to PowerShell, and let's go over to my long-term service branch version. So I'm going to go on my Hyper-V console over here. I'm going to have a 2019 long-term service channel version. So with this one, again, I've already gone into admin center, but let me go back here for a second. I don't want to quite go in there as of yet. Just go back to some of the original stuff where we'd, had the original server manager. So mostly, again, you get 2019 servers are all set up for remote management. Here you can see when you log in, it's trying to get you to use the admin center going in, which is that's where a lot of the newer changes are. So you still had the old, server manager behind here. So again, we could go into the local server. We'd obviously have, right, this console down here with the events. Mostly the same thing out of 2016, even going back to older versions. But it still had the console here where we could actually right-click and, add other servers in. So this, again, I think was my other server here. Let's see, it was the long-term service channel. Now, that was, again, the semi-inner channels. That was the name of that guy, was SVR 3-S-AC1. So let's find this guy. There he is. So this is my the server core. So I can bring it into the console here, right, to the old server manager. Then, of course, you'll see it's in progress with Windows Remote Management. The listener over that computer is now bringing in the ability for me to do remote management. So we can see events, services, pretty much the standard stuff we've had in even 2016. Being able to right-click, remote features, restart server, pretty much latch into remote management. But essentially what we have here is, limited because we're not seeing all the features. So essentially, even some things we'd have to go into different consoles. So then we bring in, again, the server manager. We're going to pretty much have the admin center installed on my server 2. And then down here, we can start adding in servers remotely. So again, if we have this, we can add in, servers on-premise, right, Windows PC, so it does support the client side. Here, again, it would be for cluster consoles. So we have, clusters, we can bring them into a single console. That, again, would be on the server side or even the Azure stack, which would be your private cloud on-premise, a larger enterprise. But then again, the ability, right, to connect up to the Azure cloud and then connect to those virtual machines and then monitor them and manage them here. So again, I would add in, again, the local server. So again, I could do it by IP address or DNS name, or again, search AD like we did in the server manager, bring that server in directly. Like over here, again, I brought in server 3 SA1, the same one we just brought into the server manager console. Of course, like I said, you can also add, and then down here, if you have, right, the subscription up to Azure and you want to add in those virtual machines, mostly you would create this server here with the admin console. You might see server 2, the server I'm on, as a gateway. So you would go in up here to the settings, at the settings of this server, and then over here down on the gateway, you would go into Azure, and you would just it walks you through the little process to make the server a gateway server so we can access Azure resources. So again, register that application through the dialog. Takes a couple of minutes, creates the app center up there in the Azure server. And of course, when you log in, then you're registering and then accessing those resources. So again, up here on the settings, we can go back to that server manager console where we add the other servers in. So again, I'll go into the actual server. Well, again, right, so if I just hit the download here just for the server manager, you'll see that when you add the server connection, we're just seeing that one list. What we could do up here is go into the all connections, and that way we'd be able to see the all connections. In essence, when we go to this, then we can add, then you can see, right, server locally, you have the PCs, clusters, and here again, Azure virtual machines. So with the subscription, we would sign in to that subscription. Right, so I already have my sign-in passing through. Up here, you can see my, global admin has access to these resources. If we create resource groups where we store the virtual machines in the cloud, down here again, I could probably see the virtual machines I want to connect to. Then, of course, if these VMs are sitting in those resource groups, which are already running in the cloud, my 2019 servers, I can pick them. And of course, then I can actually access whether it's the backend, which is private, which is within the Azure portal, or again public facing, which might be my web services. And so I'm going to connect into the external side. All right, so now we can see we brought in that virtual machine up in Azure. So again, I have local servers. Again, I have the semi-annual channel, right? The server core. I got my 2019 data center here, the one that the admin center is installed on. Of course, I have a couple of virtual machines in the cloud now. So it also should be stated that we can also create virtual machines in the Azure portal. If we go back to the All Connections and come down to the Add, at the bottom you might have saw that we can add existing VMs in Azure or actually create new. So as long as we have the Azure subscription, we're connected to our account, you should see that it's latching into the Azure subscription. Then it'll come up with the portal that we can actually create the virtual machine. So here's again where we can store the virtual machine in resource group, give it a virtual machine name and the location it might be in. And then down here, of course, it'll give you different types of operating systems that we can actually deploy, like Data Center 2019, 2016, and 2012. So it gives us the ability, right, to actually look at those different image deployments. So with a little group policy and opening up to port 5985, which also the group policy being allowing remote RDP into the virtual machine, we can actually connect back over here to the virtual machine we just added in. So as long as the VM is running in the cloud and we have it credentials, let's get logged in. So if we got our username and password correctly, now we're connecting in. Like I said, there's a group policy for the remote access and the port opening from the virtual machine running in the Azure cloud. Then we're connecting in. And here you can see admin center connecting to that virtual machine directly, where we can see, real-time statistics. So we have down here like task management, CPU, memory, Ethernet. Again, we can see these statistics running in real time. Of course, on the side, we also have access to the Azure services, Azure hybrid services, Azure backup, file sync, which mostly be a file share on premise, synchronizing those file shares to a file storage account in the cloud. And there's also the monitoring. So if we look at the Azure hybrid services, this will come up and give us information. Even though we're connected to a virtual machine in the cloud, we can still, look at some of these services. So loading the Azure services here, which allows for, again, the Azure backup into the cloud, so we can do on-premise virtual machines or physical machines backing up to the Azure Recovery Vault for disaster recovery. So we can see these services. I've actually said it failed to get those services. All right, so let's try that again. There we go. So helping protect your virtual machines from disaster recovery, again, using the Azure Site Recovery, which we can either do Azure to Azure region recovery, or we might have on-premise resources. So we have the Azure backup, backing up or replicating on-premise virtual machines or physical machines out to the cloud. So if things fail on-premise, we can use Azure as our disaster recovery. There's also the network adapter, which allows this admin center become mostly a point-to-site VPN, so we can connect through it. So we might have a client side where we can create a point-to-site profile, give that down to the user, give them the ability right to sit on the client side and connect up to the cloud resources. So again, a developer might be using SQL Management Studio or Visual Studio to connect up to the cloud resources and being, developing on the client side. Down here again, we have the Azure Monitor, which we're bringing the log analytics. So we have the log analytics workspace, deploying agents down to on-premise, other cloud providers, whether it's virtual or physical. We can again have, full observability or more or less the log analytics and deep diving into how the applications are performing. Health service monitoring, and then of course there's also the Azure Arc service. We might again see that we might be here. I'm on-premise with the admin center connecting up to Azure resources. Azure Arc also has the ability to bring the on-premise server up to the cloud. Azure Arc is a larger enterprise, which can obviously connect to resources around the world, helps you, again, govern mostly all your resources through policy. So again, we can see that we would have the Azure backup. So we can latch in, right, we'd set this up, creating what they call a recovery vault, which we'd store our data to the recovery vault and then restore from there. Like I said, there's also the file sync service, Azure Monitor, right, for the log analytics, and of course Security Center, so we can get the agents down here either into the cloud virtual machine or on-premise virtual machine, and then deal with the deep log analytics. Let me go back up here to all connections, and again we can connect back to this other virtual machine. See again, right, we're just logging in, and you'll see that again we have that uniform dialog that we can have the same access to all these virtual machines or physical machines. Let's see if I can connect in there with that password. There we go. So again, we're connecting into another virtual machine in the cloud. So again, we have hybrid services where again we can latch into the backup, the file services monitoring, and of course down here then we have all the individual things that we might be looking at individually if we were into the server with all the different snap-ins. But again, here we'd have all those individual snap-ins singularly. So here again, this is a virtual machine in the cloud. So let's go back up to all connections. And then you'll see all the servers I have connected. So there's, again, connecting to the virtual machine in the cloud or connecting to myself here locally as the gateway. So then you'll see on the left a lot of the same things available. So no matter whether it's, an on-premise server or the cloud server, we're going to have a lot of these capabilities available. So here again, this came up on-premise because in the cloud, again, might be a little latent, bringing in the, almost like task management, seeing real-world statistics down here in the browser. So this should come up on the virtual machine in the cloud also, so you can come down here and start looking at statistics. Mostly in your bottleneck areas, right? CPU, memory, Ethernet. And then, of course, again, right, cloud services being available to, again, any virtual machine we bring into Admin Center. So this is the hybrid service. But again, like I say, I can create what they call a recovery vault. So I create this recovery vault in Azure, which is usually in the region, like I'm in East US, closest to New York, so I'm in East US. So I could set up this backup vault, and then I can start backing up my server here, right, up to the cloud. So again, I'm going to have a subscription. I'm going to set up a backup routine, a recovery vault. Then down here, I'll just go through the backup items I want to back up on this machine and then back it up to the cloud, which is an offsite recovery. Yeah, I just create a paraphrase so that the data on-premise being replicated to the cloud, right, is pretty much encrypted, right, so we don't expose it over the internet. We apply it, and of course, we put on the schedule, and it starts backing up. There's also the file sync service, mostly based off Azure storage. So this is, again, mostly you can, if you come in here and you see this as a, video here you can look at. But essentially what you're doing is you're making data and all these branch offices available to everybody in the cloud. So you're replicating these on-premise file server shares up to a file storage account in the cloud. And then mostly in, real time when people create data here or create it in Mexico City, they're seeing in Seattle, by connecting to a common file share in the cloud. So file sync service is mostly not just a migration utility, but again, making the data available to all branch offices right from the central location based off the file share in the cloud. Then, like I say, we have the log analytics, which is the old OMS, Office Management Suite. So if you do own the System Center Operations Management on-premise, you can set this up. But again, like I say, this will be a cloud service, so we can use log analytics in the cloud. So we're using a subscription. We probably create a resource group. I'll just say East US. Actually, let's use an existing. I'll use the one I have here already in East US. And of course, if you see it locks in East US region, and down they have that log analytics workspace. So I install an agent. What I would do is create this log analytics workspace. What this will do, it'll install an agent on the virtual machine, the physical machine. All I got to do is go into this console on any server and bring this down, or actually connect Admin Center to the server. We can deploy the agent here. But then it starts monitoring it, and we have all these solutions like update management, change tracking, inventory. So we can have a lot more information coming in, right, to, look at, the inner workings of the machine and also monitor it over time. So this is, again, the log analytics workspace. Only so much to show you in a little bit of time here. But, yep, that would be, again, in the region you're in. Mostly you create this in East US. And then to get the updates going, we have an automation account. We have an automation account latched into log analytics. Then when the server starts requesting updates, we can bring those down on schedules. But, again, there's so many other solutions we'd have in Azure Monitor, which is also Security Center. So if we do use the monitor by latching into log analytics with the agent, Security Center would be right behind that. See, we'd have this also using that workspace, the existing one we might create. And then Security Center has a lot of areas where it makes recommendations. So one of the reasons to move to the cloud and run things in, Azure's portal or any other cloud providers, always trying to save money. So Security Center Advisor, there's a couple of components here that would make recommendations, again, where we can start saving money or compute power based off running, 2019 in the cloud. But again, I'm on a 2019 server locally with Admin Center accessing Azure resources. But the nice thing about the Admin Center, again, we do have backward compatibility. So I can still connect right to older servers like, 2012, 2012 R2, and so on. Yeah, you can look at now the local machine. Like I'm on this server here. So now I'm looking at like local certificate management. I'm looking at the device itself, event logging, file and sharing. So again, instead of going into individual snap-ins or individual, things within Server Manager, everything here is in a single pane of glass. Yep, so here's all the certificates. You can actually tell me, certificates on here might expire. So it gives you more graphical insight, right, to what's on this machine now, the one I'm actually logged into. And of course, you have devices you can look at. And so it takes a little bit of time for this data to come up sometimes. But, the event logging, like I say, the event logs application. So here again, like device manager. Right, then you have event logging based off application system logs. Looking at the firewall based off its rule sets. Looking at installed applications that are going in the control panel or the settings snap-in. Right, computer management based off local user and groups. Computer management, right, network. So the network connections, performance monitor. Bringing up an interactive PowerShell. So this is going to bring it up, right? Mostly PS remoting is turned on with remote management, so this will create a remote session right there, and it connects right into that server. I'm connecting to myself, any virtual machine or physical machine I'm connecting to in this console, as long as I have the right, I think it's PowerShell version 5 or greater. So if you are dealing with older machines, you want to make sure that PowerShell version 5 is on there or greater, and then we can connect to and we can connect into it right based off the remote PowerShell. Processes, registries, remote desktop, adding roles and features in remotely. Looking at any scheduled tasks or services running on the client. Then you actually get into some other newer things like the storage management or in storage migration services. So this is again where I can bring into this console, and that might be a little bit of a component mismatch. I might have to update the server, but let's say an old 2003 server, bringing this into the console, use it as a source for storage migration and migrate to a 2019 server. So get off the older, slower servers and migrate them to the faster servers. Here again, I can see local storage, but then I can log into the storage migration service. This usually, again, if it's not there, might need to be installed. But again, it would take me to those routines of migrating from, source destinations. Here again, I'd have to, install the component, migrate servers and file shares, right, from older servers, right, or even to Azure, right, up to the file share. So that's up there, the file share we can migrate from on-premise to the cloud, or obviously server to server on-premise. So we install that component, and you would go through those routines. Another one is, again, replica. This might be more on the clusters where we have large storage arrays, and we, again, install this storage replica. So, let's say we're replicating from, the production site to a disaster recovery site. So we have our whole production pretty much mirrored in a disaster recovery site. We're replicating the storage from that, production environment to disaster recovery site. So storage replica can help you with that. There's a lot of more internals there, a lot of third-party utilities. And that's really where the admin center can come into play, because inside of here, again, we have a lot of these extensions. So if you look in here, right, sometimes if you're using other third-party machines, like down here, like EMC or some other storage providers, so if you're using those snap-ins, they can latch right into that hardware, and of course you can get graphical monitoring here based off those components or storage arrays. So there's a lot of work on the third-party market, right, to bring in other extensions, right, to actually latch into that hardware. Of course, Azure also has the marketplace to help you with some of the other things in the cloud. So not enough time to go through everything, but server management, adding servers in here, either through the cloud on-premise or looking at the server core, which is just logging into the console, but then monitoring it here. Right, so this is the actual server core, same features, right? Being able to back up that server or replicate the file shares out, install the Azure Monitor agent so I can monitor that server core, certificates, devices, so pretty much graphical, right? Event logging. Firewall, installed apps, everything. Packet monitoring, so we have actually the ability to do packet capture. So if we want to capture the network traffic, PowerShell, processes, and everything else. And then down here again, the system insights. All right, so this would be installed, and it would come up with all the recommendations of looking at forecasting, mostly how's the CPU been used, how's the storage been used, the networking. So it looks at trending over time, and then makes forecasting of whether the storage is going to grow or the networks have been at a steady pace. So over here, I think I have that installed on this server. So I think I have it installed on my gateway server. So that comes up down here. You can look at the. See, it's actually going through the components there. But down here, you have System Insights. I think I did install it here. And then so you install the agent. Of course, then it comes up. It makes recommendations. So there's the CPU forecasting, networking. Right, storage, some of the major bottleneck areas again. And of course, it scans it over time when you click into these areas. It's pretty much going to come down and then, give you trending over time. So it's looking, forward, like out here, right? Where it might forecast in the future how your forecasting might happen. But this is how history's been happening. So if your capacity is growing, it's forecasting as to whether you're going to pretty much grow further, right? Just looking ahead. And then down you can see it's been running right over maybe the last month. And of course, I'm not doing anything here on my local machines, but in the real world, right, there'd be a lot of activity there. So in 2019, right, Admin Center really opened up the door remote management, backward compatibility, forward compatibility. So that should be good.